Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Rules of Engagement. As always, I'll be your host, Nick, axslav, ranish, as we explore tactics and strategies used in the game of Starcraft 2. Today we're going to take a look at the Innovation vs. RoE match from the MLG Winter Championships at Dallas. It's the Winners Round 3 match between probably at the time the best Protoss player in the world and the best Terran player in the world. It was a great set of 3 games. We're going to take a look at all 3 of those games, 1, 2, and 3, and of course at the end of the show, it's going to be the viewer Q&A. If you have any questions, you want me to answer them in future Rules of Engagement episodes or this one, please go ahead and tweet me at axslav on Twitter or leave questions in the YouTube comments, youtube.com/officialmlgsc2. Of course, I'll be checking out the comment sections on the Rules of Engagement YouTube videos. So first, let's start off with Innovation vs. RoE game number 1. A couple things I want to talk about in this game are going to be early Protoss defense, the Protoss first Terran mid game, and also a couple things to keep in mind as a Protoss when you want to move out and take that third base. It's probably one of the most important bases in Protoss vs. Terran, and a couple tips and tricks on how to establish that base. So we're going to jump into the game here at the 5-minute mark. And the first thing we're going to take note of is the Protoss build order, right? So this is, of course, is going to be Rain. And the one thing we're going to notice from Rain is that right after the Nexus, staying on a single gateway, he builds a robotics facility immediately after that. And the reason why he does that is because, of course, he has this mothership core, and its defensive abilities are very powerful. Photon overcharge on the Nexus, time warp, all these things really help you as far as being able to defend your base against attacks very easily. So with that mothership core, you don't need the early gateway units quite as much as you might otherwise, which allows you to tech up much faster. So you want to tech up fast, but teching up fast, of course, means you're going to be short on gateway units. That's where that mothership core is so essential on defense. What you want to do is you want to get a few gateway units early, preferably sentries, so they can build up energy. Then if your opponent puts on aggression, you can prevent your opponent from getting into the main. You can prevent them from getting to your workers with force fields. While that planetary fortress cannon Photon overcharge on the Nexus does this work. You can see here, Terran comes in to pressure you. Your sentries prevent them from going up the ramp. Your Photon overcharge should drive the Terran back. And because you tech so fast to get that robotics facility up as soon as possible, you have those observers out and ready to spot these Widow Mine drops. Of course, you also have Stalkers and a backup observer here to spot drops in the main. So Protoss defense is much easier in Heart of the Swarm, and because it's easier, go ahead and start your tech buildings much faster, as it's more important to get started on your tech earlier as well. Again, the front, Photon overcharge, sentries can defend it. The back, that's where you want to have the Stalkers, and ideally even start to get some observers out there well to help spot these drops and ward them off. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the Protoss vs. Terran mid-game. So, of course, you have your expansion. For the next few minutes, you're just getting a lot of probes, getting a few more basic gateway units, getting all of your observers out to scout your opponent and see exactly what they're doing, and you want to progress to your mid-game. Now, in Heart of the Swarm, one thing that's a bigger threat to you as a Protoss player is drop play. Of course, Terrans love their drop play in Heart of the Swarm. So while yes, it's still great to go for the the Colossi tech because they're just a very standard staple unit of Protoss vs. Terran, you also might want to go ahead and go for a blink a little bit earlier than normal, right? A lot of times people don't want to get that Twilight Council so early because they're worried that its cost is really going to hurt them. But in Heart of the Swarm, it's very good to get blink play early, especially if you're very worried about drops doing a lot of damage, if you've had some bad experiences with drops, and you really want to make your Stalkers more mobile and able to deal with them. The one thing that's also important that a lot of people make this mistake on is just because you're getting blink doesn't mean you need to get a whole ton of Stalkers. Stat for stat, Stalkers are not the greatest combat unit. Zealots and Colossi and Sentries, Immortals, all these units are much stronger first rate on confrontation. So you want to get some blink Stalkers to help against Vikings, to help against drop play, but you don't want to just make mass Stalkers because your army is going to be weak. We're spending a lot of gas invested in that army, and it's going to be a little bit weaker. So if we pause the game right here and take a look at exactly what Rain has, he only has 6 Stalkers, 9 Zealots, 3 Sentries, and 2 Colossi. So definitely Zealots are very important. Even if you're not getting charged, even if you're getting blink, you still want plenty of those Zealots. So the next thing we're going to notice here is what is Rain doing, right? He's moving out to take a potential third base. And let's say you're a Protoss player And of course, like Rain, you're in the top corner of the map. This is where you're spawning. You have your natural. You have your third. You want to take this space, right? That's the question mark. How do you go and take that? Well, the cool thing about it is if you just have a main and natural, right? You can just put your army basically right by the natural. All you have to do is have a few units to cover drops from the main, and you're fine. The problem is once you take this third base, all of a sudden, instead of having a whole bunch of different threats that are a whole bunch of different units all at one spot, there's now new angles you have to defend, right? You have to defend units walking up this ramp. You have to defend a backdoor drop, units coming up this ramp, and of course, the drop in the back, your natural as well. So with all these angles to defend, what happens is it starts to become necessary to split up your army in order to cover these different spots. But if you split up your army too much, you might have a small force get taken out by your opponent's entire army, and that can be very dangerous. So if you're going to know how to split up your army, detection is essential, which means that as a Protoss player, if you want to take a third base, you want to have ideally at least a screen of vision beyond the parts that they could hit. So they get hit from this angle, you want to detect vision over here, right? The dotted line should be your vision. You want to make sure they can't hit your third. Your vision should actually extend over here, basically. And you want to make sure they can't come in here. Your vision needs to come all the way down, basically throughout this dotted line. If you don't have that dotted line of vision with observers, with proxy pylons, with taking your watchtower, this watchtower, of course, right here, this is a really key spot to go ahead and take so you get a lot more vision. If you don't have those spots, you're not going to know how to split up the army. Drops all of a sudden can catch you off guard, or if you defend against drops, a frontal attack can be very difficult to defend if your entire army's in there. So let's look into the actual game and see what Rain does. Look at this from Rain's perspective. Exactly as I said, he has that vision. On the far right side, he's got an observer. On the top, on the left side, he has his army right there currently. He had a pylon before it's taken out. He also has an observer down here to make sure this army isn't exposed to a flank. And then his other army down here is going to head out and try to take this watchtower. And if you can combine those 4 points, the top left, the little bit lower left, the watchtower, and the far right, he's going to be in good shape. Of course, he backs away from the watchtower because he's afraid of having this army stuck alone against the entire army. Now, as he moves out to take the watchtower, so he can then have that vision range necessary to take the third base, what's important in that aspect is really the fact that if the entire Terran army is out here, right? If the entire Terran army is out here, ideally this drop force would be able to go and assist this army in clearing out the army over here. Which means you need to have a pylon or an observer up in the top left. Now, Rain, of course, he knows scaling in the game. He needs to get third base. He starts to move out to this watchtower before this force here is freed up. This force can be freed up to join this army as soon as this pylon gets up. But until it gets up, he's got to have this army here, which means this force is a little bit weaker, and he gets caught just a little bit off guard and loses that one key sentry right there. If he didn't lose that one full energy sentry, he would have been in a much better spot because he would have been able to trap that army with force fields. In fact, let's actually just back this up a tiny bit right here, right? Let's pause it really slowly and think about this sentry right here. If this sentry didn't die, right when he turns around and engages, if he actually didn't lose that sentry, right, he would have been in a position where 4 more force fields or 1 guardian shield and 2 more force fields, right? He could have just yoinked this army here, and if this got stuck, then what he does is he goes ahead and grabs his Colossi here, and he tells them to shoot right in the middle of it. And if with the 2 Colossi, all you have to do is do 1 shot in the middle, and all this pack of Marines dies. There's a few Marauders left, but, you know, you can clear those up. They're stuck against the force field. Zealots will clear them up. And he would have taken that fight convincingly. But the tricky part is that he didn't know how strong the Terran army was. He didn't know if it was entire Terran army, or if it was just a portion of it, or whatever. And that's because he didn't have, he either didn't feel confident engaging immediately because his entire army wasn't there because of the anti-drop squad, or also the fact that he used his entire army to get vision out the watchtower. And maybe, I don't know, it's hard to say should have gotten an extra observer because he already had 3 out, but Cloud Kingdom observers are really freaking good. It's a very tough spot Rain was put in. He makes the most of it though, but unfortunately once you lose that sentry and this first Colossus goes down, it starts to get worse and worse as the game goes on. Now of course with Photon Overcharge he can defend, but we're now at a point where the Terran player maybe be slightly overcommitting here. really Terran players need to stop the third base from the Protoss at this point. But he's not trading too bad. He's trading okay. And the Terran third is totally established. He's starting to mine from there. The Protoss third is in a situation where now if he wants to establish his third, not only does he need this vision here, but what's really important is he needs to get some counter harass to make up for the fact that his third's been delayed by losing that map control, being forced back to his natural. Of course, the counter harass, favorite counter harass is often that DT play, right? So we can see here, he's got proxy pylons set up. He's going to try to warp in some DTs into harass, and he's still going to try to go out and take his third base. As we move this up just a little bit here, this is what's really game determining, right? At this point, right now, we can see that the situation, Innovation is ahead by about 30 food, right? There's a 30 food difference between the two players. That's not the end of the game. Right? It's not insanely unusual in Protoss versus Terran for Protoss to be 30 food behind. But Protoss doesn't have a third base. He's a base behind. And so we do establish that base. Because he took some bad skirmishes in the mid-game, he needs space. He needs the opponent to back off. He needs to get a little bit of time to regroup. And to get that time, he needs to put on a counter harass to keep a lot of Innovation's forces at home. And if they're at home, of course, they're not attacking him. He needs that space to get his tech up, get his storm up, etc. So if his DTs can keep Innovation busy, do some damage, then Rain is right back in the game because he took some damage to harass, but if his counter harass evens it up, he'll be fine. Unfortunately, as we can see here, what happens is Innovation, of course, being a world-class player, immediately responds, right? If you look at Innovation, builds a missile turret before even a single SCV dies, and then, of course, takes out these two DTs with a single scan before they can spread around. Once DTs get spread around, it's much harder to clean them up, but if you can stop the spread of Dark Templar getting all throughout your base very early, then, of course, a missile turret or two, and he's going to be just fine. Right, so the DTs really didn't do much damage at all. They only got a couple SCV kills. And now, of course, Innovation can be back on the attack. And yes, Rain can hold this force, but as soon as Innovation's extra forces are free to go on the attack, then Rain's going to be in big trouble. So we can see here we're just going to fast forward it through the next section. Innovation's now free to clean up that little harassing pylon. And once he feels confident enough that there's no more future harass coming up, he's just going to mass up. And of course, with the supply difference given a faster third base, given the fact that Rain's third base was slowed down, Innovation's army is going to be too big. And you know what? Right here, this battle is pretty predictable. It's 190 food to 140. We're going to play it out here just for a second just to see some units die, because everyone likes to see some units die here. Even with great storms, it doesn't really matter. There's too much food for the Terran. Rain played it great, but just ran out of units. So the key thing to remember here, from a Protoss perspective, when you want to take that third base, the vision circle is extremely important. And Rain did a great job of that, but unfortunately, he moved out and he wasn't confident enough in his vision information to send that squad from his main to support his extra army. If he had the extra 3 Stalkers, 3 Zealots, he would have traded very well in that skirmish by the Watchtower, which would have allowed him to take a third immediately. Or if he had perfect force fields and lose a sentry, maybe he would have traded well anyway. But unfortunately, got caught a little bit off guard, didn't have his full forces there, took a poor trade, delayed his third base. If your base is delayed, if your third base is delayed as a Protoss, counter harass is a great way to try to get back in the game. Rain went for it using a DT play, but Innovation, of course, parried it well, and that really is what determined the game. The defending that harass extremely, extremely well by Innovation. This wraps up the analysis of game number 1 between Rain and Innovation. Take a short break and be right on to game number 2.